Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Nick Cosgrove and I am back with this week's No Filter Q&A. This is the episode where I answer all questions related to diet, training, and supplementation that I've received over the last 7 days from our in-house clients, online clients, as well as a few of our online followers. Remember, if you have any questions related to your nutritional plan, workout program, supplements you are currently taking, not taking, or considering taking, please feel free to email me those questions at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can DM me your questions on my Instagram at fitcosgrove_. All right, let's get started with this week's no filter Q&A with question number one. Nick, how long should a workout be in order to be effective? So it's not about the duration of the workout. It's what you do in that workout. There's a lot of people out there that say they're in the gym for 90 minutes to 2 hours, but they're not training for 2 hours. They're on their phone, they're talking to people, they're resting way too long in between sets. And so they're not really getting the most out of their time in the gym. In my experience, when you go in the gym and you go for shorter duration workouts, as in that maybe 45 to 60-minute max workouts, and you give it everything you have, and I don't mean lift the crazy amount of weights, I just mean that you train with the utmost amount of intensity for your level and high volume training, minimal rest periods, you're not going to want to be in the gym for longer than 45 minutes to 60 minutes. I've talked about in the past how I have clients who train with me. They come to my gym here in Vancouver, British Columbia, and they'll work with me, and we'll easily get out anywhere from 48 to 60 sets in a 45 to 60-minute workout. And we're not training light, we're training moderately heavy. Okay. But you have to remember that you have to build yourself up to that. You have to build your fitness level up to that. You don't just walk in off the street from day one and knock out 60 sets in a workout. It's not going to happen. Okay. So most people who start with me, maybe we get like, say, 20 sets, then we can work up to 30 sets and 40 sets and so on. The reason I'm using that 48 to 60 sets is because the average person who's been working with me anywhere from 6 to 12 months will hit that thresh mark. Okay. So again, it's not the duration, it's what you're doing in the gym. So if you're focused, laser focused on every set you do, minimal rest periods, really trying to create that mind to muscle connection, approaching each workout methodically, you're not going to want to spend 2 hours in the gym. You're not going to be able to spend 2 hours in the gym because never mind all the physical exertion that goes into the workout, the mental exertion as well. It's mentally exhausting if you're focused for 45 to 60 minutes on one particular task, whether that's training your chest and back together, biceps and triceps together, maybe your shoulders and legs together, or even if it's a bodybuilding split where you're working one muscle group per workout. If you're really focused and dialed into your workout, 45, 60 minutes max. I wouldn't recommend doing any more than that. Okay. And that's taking into consideration that you are using the utmost amount of intensity. And as I said, minimal rest periods, trying to get as much volume into those muscle bellies as possible. So lots of sets, lots of reps, just really focus on that mind to muscle connection. But it's not about duration. Okay. So even if you can only get 30 minutes in the gym, I've seen some people get 30-minute workouts in and they get more done in 30 minutes than some people get done in 60 minutes. Okay. So you have to forget about how long you're in the gym. You have to focus more importantly on what you're doing when you're in the gym. All right. Nick, what's more effective for fat loss, cardio or strength training? Uh, Again, it's not a popular belief, but I'm a firm believer that strength training long term is more effective for fat loss than cardiovascular training will ever be. Okay. And I know I get a lot of people who they'll flame me on this and they'll say, no, that's not right. Cardio burns fat. Well, I'm not saying cardio doesn't burn fat, but if you're asking me long term, what helps keep fat off long term? Weightlifting. It all comes back down to the amount of muscle you have. The more muscle that you're carrying, the more calories that you're going to burn in a rested state. The more calories you burn in a rested state, guess what? You're going to burn body fat. Your body fat levels are going to be low. Okay. So I'm not suggesting to not do cardio because I think cardio is excellent for the heart. In fact, I recommend everyone do some form of cardio. It could just be walking outside, but as long as you're moving your body for at least 30 minutes a day, that should be enough for your heart. Okay. But if you're looking for fat loss long term, weightlifting is the way to go. It's the smarter way to go. Because if you're relying on cardio to burn fat, well, you're always going to have to rely on cardio to burn fat. Whereas if you're doing weightlifting and you have to take 3 or 4 weeks off the gym, you're not going to lose any muscle and you're not going to lose any, you're not going to gain any fat. Okay. Unless your diet's out of control. But if you're dialing in your diet and you say, I got to take 3 or 4 weeks off the gym, maybe I got to go on vacation or I just need a break or whatever it is, you're not going to put on fat. Whereas with cardio, if you stop doing your cardio and you keep your diet the same, well, guess what? You are going to put on fat. Okay. So you have to make sure that you're training smart. And as I said, I'm not suggesting you don't do cardio, but don't become over reliant on cardio to burn fat. If you focus on the weights and you train intelligently, and if you can incorporate some supersets, some circuit training. So you're actually working your cardiovascular system at the same time. So it's a two in one, working your resistance training and your cardiovascular training, putting them together. Why not, right? That's going to even excel your results. So I wouldn't rely on cardio to burn fat. I would rely more on the weight training component, but still do cardio for overall heart health. Also, I notice this with a lot of people that do cardio on a regular basis, their conditioning in the gym is so much better versus people who don't. Their rest periods are far shorter versus people who don't do any cardio. And again, my definition of cardio is just getting that heart rate to about 120 beats per minute. That's not that hard to do, okay? If you go on a speed walk around your block or around the city, do that for 30 minutes, you're going to get your heart rate up. And that's a great way to work your cardiovascular system. All right. Okay, Nick, what are the best exercises for core strength beyond just sit-ups? So when you're talking core, you have to remember you've got what we call your transverse abdominals, your rectus abdominals, your intercostals obliques, and your spinal rectors. A lot of people, when they hear the word core, they just think about the front, but they forget about the back. You got to think of your core like an apple core. It goes all the way around. So you don't want to neglect your lower back. Okay. In fact, you want to give a lot of focus and detail to your lower back because as we age, a lot of people suffer from chronic lower back pain. Okay. So in my opinion, the best way to strengthen your core is by training it two, possibly even three times a week. And, if you follow me on Instagram or the YouTube channel, I always tell people train every single muscle group once a week. But I changed my mind on the core. Okay. And I'll tell you why. Because the core, you can work your transverse abdominals one day, you can work your rectus abdominals another day, and you can work your intercostals obliques on a third day, and even throw in lower back throughout. Okay. So exercises like hanging leg raises, exercises like lying leg raises, exercises like Swiss ball towel crunches, exercises like bicycles, reverse crunches, all these exercises work really well to help strengthen your core. If you're not familiar how to do these exercises, you can check out my Instagram. I've got lots of videos working the core, but you want to remember not to neglect that lower back. So how are you going to train the lower back? Well, all those exercises I just mentioned work the lower back indirectly. But if you want to hit that lower back more directly, my recommendation, throw in some hyperextensions. If you're okay with doing deadlifts and you find that you don't get injured doing deadlifts, they don't bother your hips, they don't bother your back, throw in some deadlifts for sure. I'm a huge advocate of straight leg deadlifts for the hamstrings. I find that works really well for the lower back. I have a lot of clients that will come in and tell me, my lower back's feeling really tight today. I'll get them doing 3 or 4 rounds of straight leg deadlifts for their hamstrings, and their lower back feels 100% better. And it's just because we stretch out those spinal rectors by working the glutes and hamstrings. So don't forget to do some form of deadlifts, whether there's a conventional deadlifts or the straight leg deadlifts. Throw in some hyper extensions. And as I mentioned, bicycles, reverse crunches, Swiss ball crunches, lying leg raises, hanging leg raises. These are all exercises that are incredibly beneficial to help strengthen your core. All right. Okay. Nick, what's the best way to figure out how many calories I should eat if I want to lose 20 pounds? Okay, well, you can look at what you're doing right now for your diet. Okay, so I would be taking a look at what does your diet look like? Now, if you're someone who's not practicing portion control, this is going to be very difficult because if you don't know how many carbs, how much protein, how much fats you're having each day, it's going to be very difficult to make these revisions. So this is why I strongly advise everyone to practice portion control. And you don't have to know your macros down to an exact T, but yeah, you should have a general idea of where your macros are. Like I can tell you right now, my carbohydrate intake on average is about anywhere from 7 to 800 grams per day. My fat is anywhere from 100 to 120 grams per day. Okay. My protein ranges from 200 to sometimes 300 grams per day, depending on what my goal is. Okay. So I can give you a general idea of where my protein, fats, and carbs are at. So first, you got to get that in order. Okay. So if you're someone who is following a diet plan, or maybe you're not following a diet plan, you're like, I need to lose my weight. You need to clean up the diet, obviously, right? So it's not necessarily take this out, take that out. It might just be lowering this, maybe increasing something else, but you have to make sure that you're balancing out your macronutrients accordingly and making revisions along the way. Okay, so it's really difficult for me to give you an answer because I don't work with you, so I don't know what your diet looks like. But I would start by writing everything down. What I recommend, like when people come work with me on a nutritional plan, I always ask them for 3 days of what they're eating. And usually I'll ask them for like 2 weekdays and 1 weekend day. So I can see how their diet changes on a day that they work versus a day that they have off. Okay. And I take that information and I plug in not necessarily their calories, but I look at their macronutrients. And it's funny because most people, even if they're following a diet that contains lots of variety and they eat out a lot, their macros are pretty much close in on a daily basis. So they're not like it's not like someone's having 800 grams of carbs one day and like 50 grams of carbs the next day. So people have eating patterns that they tend to follow. And a lot of people tend to eat some of the same foods on a daily basis, whether that be breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks. So I can take that information and I can plug in, okay, this is what you're doing right now. And your goal is to lose, in your case, 20 pounds. So I would be looking at maybe lowering your carbs, increasing your fats, rotating your protein, but I'd have to see what you're doing before I make those revisions. Because you could also be someone who's following a really clean diet and you're not losing weight. So then I look at your diet and go, okay, you're eating all the great foods, but you're not practicing proper portion control. You're eating too much of these foods. And as I mentioned last week on the Q&A, when you're eating too much of good foods, if you're still in a caloric surplus, it's going to be very difficult to lose weight. Okay. So that's why it's important to practice proper portion control. And I mentioned last week on the Q&A the importance of using measuring cups, food scales, just making sure that you're portioning out your foods accordingly. And that's how you're going to make the correct revisions. Because if you're not doing that, how do you know what to take down? How do you know what to increase? A lot of people, when they hit a plateau on their weight, they just start taking food down. Oh, maybe I'll just take out this meal or I'll skip this meal or I'll do more cardio. And that's not the answer because you can't sustain that. That's not a sustainable goal. So what happens when you hit a plateau again? What are you going to do? You're going to keep decreasing food. So that's why it's important to have a general understanding of dietary nutrition and why it's just so important to work with someone who can guide you along the way and make you understand that no, carbs are not the enemy. And yes, you can have lots of fats and feel good and still lose weight. And no, you don't need a whole bunch of protein to build muscle. Okay. So there's a lot of misconceptions out there. And in my opinion, if you're serious about losing weight and you don't know where to start, work with an experienced, knowledgeable, reputable trainer, whether that be in-house or online, someone that can help you because it will make the difference and it's going to save you so much time and effort and trial and error. Okay. It's going to fast track your results. So my recommendation, work with an experienced trainer that can guide you along the way. And if you are looking to work with a coach or trainer, feel free to hit me up, nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can DM me on my Instagram at fitcosgrove_. All right. Nick, how do you spot a fad diet? There are so many diets online that claim to work, but how do I know what really does work versus what doesn't? Yeah, good question. So that kind of leads into the question before, right? So when you're looking at diets as a whole, what I always look for is this diet plan sustainable? Okay. So when someone tells me I've been doing the carnivore diet, like, okay, well, are you going to be able to do the carnivore diet for the rest of your life? Probably not. When people tell me they're doing very low carb diets or doing intermittent fasting, say, are you going to be able to do that for the rest of your life? Chances are you're not. So you need to find a program that is sustainable. Why? Because if it's not sustainable, it's not going to be successful long term. Any diet, I've said this for years, probably said it at least 100 times on this YouTube channel. Any diet will work. Honestly, any diet you go on will work short term. If you're someone who's eating McDonald's, KFC, you're eating out every meal, you're ordering from Uber Eats, and then you start to clean up your diet, you're going to lose weight. But what's going to happen when you hit a plateau, right? Or what's going to happen when you come off that diet? You're going to put all your weight back on again. So this is why it's important to create good eating habits and have a healthy relationship with food and try to find a nutritional plan that's going to allow you to lose fat, build muscle, and have lots of energy. Okay. And I've talked about how if anyone can lose weight, that's not difficult, but it's more difficult to lose fat and sustain muscle and continue to build muscle. Okay. So that's how I spot a fad diet. Whenever someone tells me they're on one of these diets, my first question is, that's great. Can you do this for 20 years, 30 years? And they'll be like, well, I don't know. I mean, I kind of miss like if you're taking something out, like say you're someone who you're on a carnivore diet, but you really enjoy having things like rice, you really enjoy having things like oatmeal, and like, oh, I can't have that anymore. Like, well, now you can't have foods that you like and foods that actually help you in the gyms because complex carbohydrates, for example, help replenish glycogen storages. So in my opinion, by going on a diet like the carnivore diet, you're taking out essential nutrients. Not to mention a diet like that, if we're talking about that particular diet, it elevates your LDL levels. So it's, in my opinion, anything that's too extreme is not good on the body. Okay. Will it work? Of course. It's going to work short term. Okay. I've had a lot of people go on keto diets. They lose all this weight. Like, oh my God, it's amazing. I'm like, it's not amazing. You've taken out a macronutrient. A macronutrient in this case, with the keto diet would be carbohydrates. but you can't sustain that diet forever. So as soon as you start to reintroduce carbohydrates into your plan, guess what's going to happen? All that weight that you just lost, it's going to come back on. All that hard work that you just did, all that time, energy, and effort that you just put into that diet for 6 months, 8 months, maybe even a year, all wasted because the weight comes back on. You talk to anyone who's ever done the Atkins diet. Okay, I know that diet's not as popular now as it was in the early 2000s, late 1990s, but a lot of people love that diet, right? It was a very low to no carb diet. Eat any fat you like, which I don't agree with, by the way. By any fat, trans fats, saturated fats. So yeah, there were a lot of healthy fats with that diet, but I don't agree with the fact that you can just eat bacon, have bacon grease, butter, all that stuff. No. Okay. Because again, what's that going to do to your triglyceride storages, right? So what's that going to do to your gallbladder? So you have to watch these diets that go too extreme on one certain macronutrient or completely take out another macronutrient. In my opinion, a good diet, it's not only going to be a sustainable diet, but it's also going to be a diet that's going to combine all three macronutrients. So complex carbohydrates, lean protein, healthy fats. And then how much of each will depend on your genetics. It'll depend on your lifestyle, it'll depend on your activity level, and it will depend on your goal. Okay. But again, this is my opinion. No diet should take out any macronutrient. A good balanced diet should have all three of those macronutrients in there. And also, you should be looking at not just the macronutrients, but the micronutrients, the quality of the food that you are consuming. Okay. So don't just look at, oh, this has this much carbs, this has this much protein. No, no. What type of carbs? Are they simple carbs? Or are they complex carbs? Are they healthy fats? Or are they trans fats? Are they lean proteins? Are they fatty proteins? Okay, so you have to have an understanding of both macronutrients and micronutrients and have all three of those macronutrients in a good nutritional plan that's going to give you lots of nutrients, give you lots of energy, and allow you to maintain low body fat levels while continuously building and maintaining lean muscle mass. All right. Nick, what's your take on tracking macros versus intuitive eating? Okay, so actually, that's a good question, and it's a question I've received before. And here's the thing, you know, I know some people have an unhealthy relationship with food, and so counting every single macronutrient that goes into your body might not be a good thing for those people. Okay, but again, as I mentioned in one of the earlier questions, I think everyone should have a general understanding of what's going into their body and how much of something is going into their body on a daily basis. Okay. So people should be reading nutritional labels. People should be looking at something that says, oh, this contains 8 grams of sugar. No, I don't need this. I'll put it back or I'll save it for a cheat meal. Okay. So the thing with intuitive eating, though, is that if your goal, again, is to, let's say, lose weight, it's really hard to lose weight when you don't really know what's going on. And what I mean by that is you don't know how many carbs you're having. You have no idea how much protein you're having. You have no idea how many calories you're having. So how are you going to know what to do in order to lose weight? And I've seen this happen before. People will start going to the gym and they'll start doing all this cardio, but they're not changing their diet. And they're not really getting any results. I mean, they might lose 1 or 2 pounds because of the increase in the of activity, but they're not really making like in my opinion sustainable results. They're not really making results that you're like, wow, this person's really losing weight. So you have to make sure that you're keeping track of what you're doing if your goal is to lose weight or gain weight, because if you're just going by intuitive eating, I mean, that can work for some people, but I haven't seen it work for most people. Okay. Now, if your goal is just to kind of maintain what your physique looks like, and you feel good, like, hey, I have enough muscle, I don't need to get any leaner, I have lots of energy, then yeah, if intuitive eating is working for you, I say do it. And the thing is, I have to be careful because I don't want people to have develop an unhealthy relationship with food. So by me telling you the only way that you're going to be successful is if you count your macronutrients, that's not true. Okay. And in my opinion, the best way to focus on whatever your goal is just to have a general understanding of what's going into your body. Okay. So I'm not against intuitive eating, but again, if your goal is to lose weight or build muscle, it helps to have a plan. It helps to have something at least like just a template of what you're doing so you can go back and go, I'm not really putting on any weight. Maybe I need to change this because you have data. You can say, oh, I'm having 300 grams of carbs. I'm having 250 grams of protein. I'm having 8 grams of fat. I still am not putting on any weight, whether it be on the scale or I'm not increasing my weights in the gym. So I've hit a plateau. I'm stalling here. I become stagnant with my results. So knowing that I have this much protein, this much carbs, this much fats, I'm going to start increasing some, not all, but some. Oh, am I putting on weight now? Yes, perfect. Am I not? Okay, back to the drawing board. Now I have to increase this, decrease this. But if you don't know, it's very hard. And you're kind of just guessing. You're going in blind. So this is why I strongly advise people just to have a general idea of what you're consuming on a daily basis, because it will help. Okay. And these days it's so easy. I mean, you could put in your diet on a chat GPT and it'll give you a breakdown of your carbs, protein, fats. Again, though, just be careful though, because there's a lot of misinformation out there still. So this comes down to working with an experienced coach that can help you. But if you're just starting out and you want to just try some things on your own, my recommendation, just have a general idea of what you're consuming on a daily basis so you'll know when and where to make the revisions needed. All right. Nick, how do you approach training someone who hates exercise? I think it's important to be empathetic to people who don't like to exercise, especially when you're a trainer coach, because you have to understand that not everyone loves the gym. In fact, most people probably hate going to the gym, right? When you look at the average person who goes to the gym, most people don't like it. Of course, you got those few people who do love training, of course, and then they're addicted to it. But I will tell you, if you were to take a poll of my clientele base that we work with, if it wasn't for working with us, most of them would not be going to the gym on their own. Okay. That's why they hire trainers. They want that accountability. Like, yeah, for sure. There's a lot of people that like to hire trainers because they want to learn something new, but most people hire trainers for the accountability. They're not going to show up late. They're going to show up on time. They're paying for a session. They can work in a private training facility. So it's almost like going to the dentist. Nobody wants to go to the dentist, but they understand it's important. It's good for their body. It's good for their health. It's good for their overall well-being. So it's something that they make themselves do. Having a trainer or coach there waiting for you just makes it a little bit easier because you have that accountability factor. Okay. But I think it's important for every coach to be empathetic towards their clients because you can't just assume that your clients love working out like you do. Because most personal trainers out there love going to the gym. They live in the gym. They love leg day. They love training back. They love training chest. They whatever. If they could, they would do every single muscle group every day of the week. Of course, that's not a good idea because you will overtrain. Okay. So, but you have to understand that most people are not as in love with the gym as you might be. So it's important to understand that and then approach those people with a plan that's going to help them. And you don't have to give them your workout. You don't have to give them your training split. But if you just give them something that's giving them more than they were doing on their own, just moving, just for a lot of people, just getting to the gym is a struggle. Okay. So never mind getting through the workout, but just getting to the gym is a struggle. So celebrate the little wins with them and explain, this is really good. You haven't missed a workout. You've been training with me for the last 6 months and you haven't missed a session. This is great. Or when you first started out, you were calling in sick, you were showing up late, and now you're really consistent with your training. So I'm not focused on the physique. I'm not focused on the weight on the scale. I'm focused on the fact that now they're showing up consistently on time. That right there is a goal that's been accomplished. And maybe it wasn't their goal, but that was my goal with them. So I think it's important, again, you have to have some understanding with somebody and understand that that person that you're working with, whether it's man, woman, it's a teenager or it's an elderly person or someone, businessman, businesswoman, that they don't necessarily want to be in the gym. And it's your job as a coach or trainer to work with that type of personality and try to push them, but also know when to back off. And that's important too, because I know there's a lot of coaches out there that just push, 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 and you're going to push your client away. Okay. So I don't do that with people. I really try to read them and I know when to back off. And that's probably from years of experience too. I know when someone comes in and they're having a rough day, I might not push them as hard as far as the weights are concerned. I might leave out an exercise that's a little bit more difficult than others. But again, it depends on the personality. There's some people that want me to push them hard and I push those people. But a good coach will know when to push and when to back off. All right. Okay. Nick, can you still see results if you don't meal prep or track macros? Yeah, so this kind of comes back to the intuitive eating again. Of course, you definitely can. Okay. I mean, you can, but you can see better results if you practice portion control, if you meal prep and you track your macros. Okay, so this is a good Q&A. I'm getting a lot of questions on the meal prepping and the macros today and portion control. I think this is because of last week's episode. It's so important to anything you do in life to have a plan. So there's a lot of people like you go to school, you get a degree, you have a plan, right? You're following a blueprint, right? You're building a house, you have a blueprint. You're buying real estate, you have a blueprint. You're investing in the stock market, you do your research, you have a blueprint. So same thing with your body. You want to build muscle, you have to put together a blueprint. You have to put together a plan. You want to lose weight, you got to put together a blueprint. You got to put together a plan. So it all comes back down to being prepared. So, like I said, I have no problem with intuitive eating if that works for you. But for most people, if your goal is to build muscle, lose fat, maintain overall health and well-being, it's good to have a blueprint and it's good to be prepared. So, yes, meal prepping is going to give you better results because you're not going to be going to, uh, you know, Chipotle's at lunch. Okay, you're going to have your meal that you prepared ahead of time, right? You're not going to be having a burger and fries for dinner because you're going to come home and you're going to have that salmon and rice that you cooked the other day. Okay, so meal prepping, in my opinion, the people who meal prep get better results. Okay, the people that plan ahead in anything in life get better results. So it's not that you're not going to get results if you're not doing those things, but don't expect to get the same results as someone who is. It's like preparing for a test. The people who study for the tests are generally going to do better than the people that don't, right? So it's the same thing when you're putting together a plan to build muscle, lose fat. You have to be prepared, okay? Will you get results? Of course. The person that doesn't study, they might even pass the test. Are they going to do as well as the person that did study? Probably not, okay? But again, do you want it depends on how bad you want the results. If you're really dedicated and you're like, I really want to put on muscle, then you'll prepare your meals ahead of time. You'll track your macronutrients. You'll make sure you don't skip your training sessions. You'll make sure that you don't miss a meal because you want those results. If you're kind of lackluster, you're like, I don't really care if I lose fat. I don't really care if I put on muscle. Well, then, yeah, you might get decent results, but nothing substantial. Okay. And most likely nothing sustainable because you're more likely when you're not preparing for certain things, you're more likely to fall off track. Oh, I forgot my gym shoes. I'm going to not go to the gym today. If you're at work or, oh, I don't feel the best because I didn't prep my meals. So it's going to affect the amount of weight I lift. So I'm just going to go in and do half my workout as opposed to all my workout. Okay. So being prepared is so important. And like I said, you will put on some muscle. You'll probably even lose some fat if you don't meal prep and you don't track your macros, but you'll put on even more muscle and lose even more fat if you do. All right. Okay. Last question. Nick, do you think that fit people actually have better sex lives, or is that a myth? No, I would think people who are more fit have way better sex lives. Uh, your cardiovascular endurance is better, your muscular endurance is better, your overall health and well-being is better. You feel more productive, you feel more confident in your own skin. So yeah, of course, I feel that people that are healthy and fit have way better sex lives than people who aren't. I mean, I know people who are sedentary who are with a partner and they might have sex once a month, once every few months. To me, that's not good. So I feel like if you're active and you're fit, you're going to have a stronger libido and you're going to want to have sex with your partner almost on a daily basis if you can. It doesn't have to be on a daily basis, but in my opinion, you're going to want to because you're going to have a higher libido, but for both men and women, because working out elevates testosterone levels. If your testosterone levels are higher, there's a good chance your libido is going to be higher. Okay. So absolutely, I do think that. And again, it's not me shaming people who are sedentary and who are not as active and fit, but I would imagine people who are not as active and fit, they feel fairly lethargic. They might not feel as confident in their own skin. So, with their shirt off or when they're naked, they might not feel as confident. So it's a little bit harder to maybe have a higher libido. If you're following a bad diet, that can create some problems, right? If you're having blood flow issues for men, that could create erectile dysfunction. So there's a lot of benefits that go along with weight training besides building a better physique. A lot of it goes down to healthier libido, right? So, when I talk about health and well-being, I'm also including libido in there. And a lot of people will tell me when they're working out on a regular basis, they feel better about themselves and they do have a higher libido. They have more energy, they're more productive. So it translates to the bedroom. Okay. So yeah, I absolutely do believe that. Again, not everyone, right? I mean, there's probably some people out there who are sedentary and they don't do anything like, no, I have a great libido. I have sex every day. Well, good for you. But the general population, I would imagine the people who are fit and active and constantly moving have a higher libido than the people that don't. Anyway, that's it for this week's No Filter Q&A. This episode will be going up on Monday, May the 26th. As a reminder, if you have any questions related to your nutritional plan, workout program, supplements you are currently taking, not taking, or considering taking, please feel free to email me those questions at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can DM me your questions on my Instagram at fitcosgrove_. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for supporting my YouTube channel, my online coaching business, as well as my in-house personal training business here in Vancouver, British Columbia. I truly do appreciate the support and feedback that I receive from each and every one of you. Thank you all once again, and I will see you all next week. Bye for now.